so it seems that the new Rogal Dorn tank has no bottom bits to its hull, and as a result, the internet descends into flames. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today I thought we'd take a quick video to cover the small drama surrounding the Rogal Dorn tank and the rather conspicuous looking hole that it has in its bottom. Honestly, for me, I think this got a bit more reaction than I was really expecting on the internet. It really does seem to be a hot topic for the discussion this week though. A few enormous Reddit threads and a lot of people asking me to cover it on the channel, so here we are, and I thought we'd just talk through the pros and cons. I do find the whole situation pretty funny, if nothing else. Basically, the news, as I'm sure you gathered by the picture, is that now the Rogal Dorn tank has gone on sale, Games Workshop allows people to show off their model reviews of the tank, and perhaps the most obvious thing about it that quite a few people picked up on is the fact that the Rogal Dorn tank is hollow, there's no bottom plate to it, and you can see up into the insides of it if you turn the tank over. Obviously all Warhammer 40k tanks are hollow, but the fact that it's quite so obviously on display like this maybe just gives the tank a bit of a different feel, a bit more like you're playing a bit of a shell or a facade of a tank, as opposed to a solid object like the rest feel when they're enclosed. The most commonly circulated picture that I've seen of this one is this still from Chris Frozen's video on YouTube, and I'll link that original one down in the video description. Now there's been a lot of discussion on the internet that I thought I'd sum up in just a second. Some pretty funny takes, and also a fair few people who either strongly didn't like this or didn't really mind too much. But I feel like the reason that Games Workshop's decided to do this is because of the amount of space it will take up on the sprue. My guess would be that when they're designing the tank, they're saying that it's only going to have this many sprues, we can use that space for as many model components as we want, what do we want on them? It seems from that point they had a choice. They could either include some more aesthetic upgrades or more options for it, or have quite a large chunk of the sprue taken up by that base plate, which is a hefty sized bit of plastic I guess that people often aren't going to see. It seems that on balance they chose not to include this base plate, figuring that most people wouldn't mind too much if they can't even see it when the tank's the right way up, and choose to include more accessories and weapon options on the tank instead. I think it's probably more that way around that the decision's been made, as opposed to just being too cheap to include a little bit more plastic in the kit. It's not like the plastic really cost them anything. Whereas the initial process to make sprues I think is at least reasonably expensive for them, to the extent where it probably would have eaten into their profits for the tank, and Games Workshop certainly likes their money. My guess is that if they had included an extra sprue in this tank's box, they probably would have charged us more for it. So while obviously a lot of people aren't too happy about not getting a base for the tank, I feel like the actual decision might have been made as to whether or not to include the base plate, or to slap an extra £5 or $10 on the tank or something. I have seen a few people theorising that there might be another upgrade sprue for the tank coming at some stage. Again, I guess that could be possible. I feel like if they did that though, it would probably be a similar sort of release to, say, the Space Marine Repulsor Executioner over and above the original Repulsor, a different packaged kit with some bigger and heavier guns or something. I'm not sure that's the likeliest rumour in the world, but I guess it's not an impossibility for a variant upgrade of the tank in a later edition. In any case, the big Reddit discussion threads have yielded a few really good hot takes. I feel like the thing that I've seen just about everyone parrot on every thread is that this is basically now the Flintstone tank of Warhammer 40k. There's nowhere for the guardsmen to sit, so they just walk under the tank and the tracks are just an illusion. I saw a few people discussing what happens if it hits a mine. Nothing, because there's nothing to hit, and you can't get a hull breach if there's no hull. The Imperial Guard playing some 4D chess against the enemies of the Emperor there. The fact that Games Workshop has named it after Rogal Dorn, yet forgotten to fortify the tank. And at least the theoretical possibility that you could have a Harlequin's model perhaps charge the tank and then wind up with a charge move inside it, due to their Harlequin's panoply allowing you to move through other models horizontally. So I guess if there is enough room in there, then you might well be able to finish a charge legally within the tank and take apart the crew from the inside. I guess it'd be all fun and games until the tank is legally allowed to shoot you from inside it, using all the non-turret weapons to fire into engagement range in some sort of weird twist of geometry. In any case, all jokes aside, some people do seem to be legitimately fairly annoyed by this. Seems like there's been not one but two enormous Reddit posts with over 2,000 upvotes. It seems at least a fair amount of people care about this. I think the main reason is kind of obvious. The tank costs £55, $90 or €70. Games Workshop do charge their models at a bit of a premium, and in general I think people expect them to be at fairly good quality. In my opinion, the rest of the tank is absolutely fine, quite a nice model all in all, though it's obviously a bit subjective as to whether people prefer the looks to the rust for their tastes. I feel like it might be just because this is very different to a lot of Games Workshop's other offerings that they put out. Most of the other tanks do have an underside to them, and I feel like it might be more the case that people feel like it's a loss of quality as opposed to much actual change in function of the model. I think perhaps the biggest issues are that it feels a bit cheap. It would look a little bit bad if it got turned upside down, say if you wanted to represent it being wrecked or something. In general, in the 40k rules, you usually remove it from the battlefield, but if you were playing narratively, you might well just want to leave it there as a bit of wrecked terrain. And I feel like perhaps in Warhammer 40k more than most places, the feel and the story of a model is pretty important as well. I think to quite a lot of people it's maybe just important to know that the tank has got a base plate to it, it feels like a fully rounded vehicle rather than just a shell. Perhaps in the same way that people also place value in other bits of models that they can't even see, things like the internal control panels and things on rhinos. A lot of people quite enjoy the fact that they were there on the model, even if they wouldn't be seen when the model was completed. I think it's safe to say that the model sales aren't doing badly. It does seem to have sold out on Games Workshop's web store at time of recording in the UK, but it also does sound like, at least anecdotally, there's a fair few people commenting that they were going to buy one and now they're not. It seems that at least a fair few people feel strongly enough about it that it does tip the balance. In general, I feel like the majority of people do just feel that it's maybe just a bit cheap to have a very expensive model without a base plate. But I feel like there's a fair amount of sentiment for people who just don't really care all that much. I must admit, I have ordered the tank myself, and I can't say that I'm particularly inclined to return it or anything. Looking forward to getting it and assembling it, bottomless hull or not. The bottom of the hull's not going to be visible when the tank is face up, which is going to be pretty much most of the time that it's on the table. It's not exactly the most new phenomenon from Games Workshop in the world. They have had things that haven't had bottoms to tanks before in the past. I guess just maybe not quite as regularly recently compared with their more recent plastic kits. I feel like if it does disturb you a fair bit, it's not exactly the hardest fix in the world. My solution would just be to put a cheap piece of plastic card over it. I've got plenty kicking around that could easily be cut to the right size. Though I have seen a couple of places already offering a 3D printed alternative, and some people already having bought the design to 3D print. Obviously though, at premium Warhammer prices, you would generally expect not to have to do that if you wanted to have the bottom of the tank, but again I would say it's something that matters more to some people than others. Finally, I have seen a few people saying that it might actually have a few positives, might allow some easier magnetization of options from within the tank, or even someone saying that they could store spare parts in it. I'm not sure if that was a joke or not. I also saw a couple of people on Reddit saying that instead of Flintstone legs, you could be putting a small RC motor inside it, and you could have yourself a remote controlled Rogal Dorn tank nipping around the battlefield, which would be kind of awesome. Probably the sort of thing that you could equally do with any 40k tank, but I guess Games Workshop's pre-cut the slot for you here. As I mentioned earlier as well, I do feel like the tank might have been costed a little bit cheaper as the result of not including a fourth sprue in it. Obviously, just in objective terms, £55, €70 or $90 is a lot for a model tank, but honestly on the scale of Games Workshop releases, it's not as bad as it could be. Only a little bit more than say the Space Marine Gladiator tanks despite being significantly bigger, and a decent £10 or $20 less than say the Land Raider Crusader or the Repulsor Executioner. When this tank isn't actually that much smaller than them, it really is pretty massive compared with the Ross. Honestly, if I'd been predicting prices, I would have guessed that it probably would have been the same as the Repulsor Executioner, £65, €85 and $110, so I wonder if that might go partly towards that. I would be kind of interested if people would have preferred to have, say, the extra sprue, maybe a base plate and some other aesthetic bits in the kit, and pay an extra £10 or $20 for it, or if they might have preferred Games Workshop to cut back on some of the upgrades for the tank, and include that base plate instead of some of those. Obviously the ideal situation is to have it all, but Games Workshop being Games Workshop do like to sell things. I feel like the choice might have been between those realistically from their sales point of view. So anyway, let me know what you make of the scandalous, bottomless Rogal Dorn. Looking forward to hearing all the thoughts down in the comments. I feel like this is probably an issue where some people are going to care a lot, some people not at all. It'll be interesting to get some alternate takes down in the comments. In any case, if you'd like to keep up with 40k news and developments, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.